So I guess I'd like you to start where you feel the best way to enter into it would be.
Okay, I always believe in starting with current events and then explaining why this is happening based on the past and
Okay.
where it's
Mm-hmm.
going. Because if you understand the past, you know the present and you also know the future, nine
Right.
times out of 10.
So for the average American, Canadian listening that doesn't know the, how do we say it, non-accidental version of history, um,
Mm.
how do we explain to them and make sense to them? Because a lot of people are wondering, why are we going to war with Syria? I've only heard this. So what are we hearing right now? You know what I mean?
Okay, the first thing that we all need to do, especially as Christians, is wipe the idea of historical evolution away from our minds because there's no such thing. Satan has a will. I will exalt my throne above the stars. I will do this. I will do that. I will be like God.
It's always I.
Yeah, exactly. Right? So people think things just happen. Well, Satan clearly has a will. God has a will. God has given us free will. So things don't just happen, they are made to happen. And there are three kinds of people: those who watch things happen, those who make things happen, and those who wonder what happened. Okay, so Syria in under 2 minutes,
Okay.
and the Federal Reserve in under 2 minutes. Every single empire from the dawn of time has always rotted from within and overreached at the same time. It is true with the Greek Empire, the Roman Empire, the Nazi Empire, the Soviet Empire, and every single empire. So why does anybody think that America should be any different based on 5,000 years of history? Like, wake up.
Well, then I think that would be because they don't know 5,000 years of history.
Oh, they know about Miley Cyrus and the NFL.
Whoa.
Don't touch the NFL, Leonard, please.
Well, no, because that's
we
our
show that
state
in
religion,
church,
right?
Leonard.
Yeah, we have our big
We
Super
we
Bowl
actually
parties.
we actually do have Super Bowl parties at our church, and I'm wondering, are we really reaching out to the community that way? Is that really what God wants us to do?
You know what? I said something off the cuff to my cousin 3 years ago, and he just stopped in his tracks and goes, "That's a nugget, Leonard." And I said, "You know what? We have made a religion out of sport, a sport out of mocking religion, and all we really need is a relationship with God."
So true.
I'm going to quote you on that a lot.
There you go. It just comes to me because not because I'm so smart, but because I've got a particular grounding,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm just using that grounding, and I'm casually, non-egotistically communicating that grounding.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
And
not saying I'm smarter than you. I'm saying I've been trained in areas that matter. The NFL does not really matter.
it's not
It's
news
No, it's entertainment. That's all
or
that it is.
amusement, which is
Yes.
another interesting word. But
It is bread and circuses.
And I would just wanted to say, I'm sorry that I'm cutting in here, but with sports, I mean, I've always thought of it this way. I'm sure you've thought of it, but I mean, I've never been a big sports person. I think anything can become a distraction or an idol if you let it. But with sports, it seems as though there is this almost like this breeding going on while you're raised in this family from this place to support that team. You know what I mean? And that just perfectly primes you for whatever party you're going to jump into and follow through politics or whatever. And for me, it's interesting because we base our what are sports teams based off of? Location, which is pretty much out of all children's control, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we can't move ourselves anywhere else. So it's kind of a basis like, oh, my town's better than your town. Well, is that really true? And people will get so insanely nuts about, cutting each other down about this stuff, where it honestly gets so serious. And I mean, and some of it's just playful, but it seems like it just breeds prejudice almost.
Well, I'll tell you what. The Romans perfected the art of social domination and control. At one point in the history of Rome, which was a city-state, which is a whole concept of itself, there were more slaves than citizens. And that was tolerated for several generations because of the huge spectacles the Roman elite would serve up to the masses. I'll just give you one example. The gladiatorial fights 2,000 years ago were, in terms of a spectacle, far better than any NFL game and Super Bowl halftime show. There is evidence to suggest that the Circus Maximus had the ability to be temporarily flooded, and they would haul in naval ships into the arena and reenact naval battles with sharks in the arena.
I've heard of that before.
I have not heard that.
That is based on historical fact. They had the ability to divert a river. They would salt the water, which would rise in temperature because it's baking on the ground, which is saturated from a creek or an underground river which ran right beside the Circus Maximus. And they would do exactly what I just said. And for a Caesar who typically went mad, I mean, the youngest Caesar to assassinate his father was at age 14.
Huh.
To imagine raising a 14-year-old kid who kills you because he wants to be Caesar. And we have Caesars marrying their horses and Caesars committing suicide just because they can. It makes no sense. And so back then, the leadership was insane. And I'm looking at our leadership tonight, and I'm saying, look, John Kerry, he's not altogether there. I mean, there's something wrong with him physically as he's giving his testimony. I mean, I'm not saying that as a partisan slight. I'm saying there's something wrong with the man. And when you understand that John Kerry was a tomb mate to George W. Bush, then there's no distinction between the red team and the blue team anymore. Mm-mm. It's all the same agenda. Right. So Syria. Syria is about one thing: the petrodollar. Since 1971, the U.S. dollar should have crashed 3 or 4 times over, but it didn't, because of the work of one evil genius named Henry Kissinger. He approached the Saudis, King Faisal, back in about 1972, 1 year after the U.S. dollar was taken off the gold standard, okay? And he said, I'll make you an offer you can't refuse. If you sell all your oil to the world in U.S. dollars only, we will buy a generous percentage of all of our energy requirements from you. And the Saudis, along with some other conditions, accepted. And the Saudis pretty well steer OPEC. So what the Saudis do, OPEC pretty well follows. And that arrangement of the OPEC nations selling their oil in U.S. dollars only has generally worked until about the year 2000. That is when Saddam Hussein wanted to sell his oil in euros. Big mistake. You don't mess with the New World Order's currency blood supply, which is the U.S. dollar. That, by the way, is, if we could find a replacement for the U.S. dollar that wasn't controlled by the New World Order, the New World Order would literally dissolve. Okay. Mm-hmm. So anyways, that's not going to happen anytime soon. So that's just a pipe dream. So back to Saddam Hussein. That is why Saddam Hussein had to be labeled a terrorist and in league with Al Qaeda and possessive of weapons of mass destruction. So I still speak with Christians today who say that Saddam Hussein really had weapons of mass destruction.
Oh, yeah.
And I will show them clips of the former president of the United States saying that it turns out that Saddam Hussein did not have weapons of mass destruction, and they won't believe it. And I'll tell you why they don't believe it. Because they have associated a trusting, caring, lying figure by the name of George W. Bush with the absolute shock of 9/11, and they have literally been psychologically traumatized so that they can't but help believe the lies.
Oh, yeah, totally.
And you can't but help believe the lie because the consequences of believing the truth that your eyes can see are just too stressful, so you end up believing the lie. And
Right.
this is what I'm up
Yeah.
against.
Right.
So Saddam Hussein had to go, and he certainly went. And remember, his first sin was angering OPEC and the U.S. in the late 80s and early 90s until Operation Desert Storm by over-pumping oil because he wanted to get rid of his foreign debt.
Oh, shame on him.
Yeah. So the world was literally flooded with oil, cheap oil, which meant that the United States was getting less of a kickback. So Saddam managed to tick off OPEC and the United States, and he literally asked the American ambassador, April Glaspie, what would the United States response be if I invaded Kuwait? And April Glaspie told him to his face, we have no opinion on the Arab conflicts such as your dispute with Kuwait. So Saddam Hussein said, okay, looks like I'm going to invade Kuwait. And he certainly did in short order. And of course, we trapped him. So he was an evil dictator then. Never mind the fact that he was an evil dictator used against the Iranians 10 years before. Just forget about that. Blot that out of your mind. Never mind the fact that we gave him poison gas, which he used against his own Kurdish population. Blot that out of your mind. Never happened. And Saddam Hussein had to be killed essentially 3 times over. First against the Iranians, then against the Gulf War I fiasco, and then in the War on Terror in 9/11. It's handy when you can pretty well kill a dictator that you've controlled all along 3 times over. So then it came along Muammar Gaddafi, and this is all related. Because Gaddafi, who's literally been stoned on opium for a couple decades, he's just no. I'm serious. You watch.
How do we believe
you watch
you?
the guy's speeches. He's half baked, and
Wow.
but he did a lot of good. But he's still an evil North African dictator. He was introducing the idea of the gold-backed North African dinar.
Right. I know that.
Right. You don't do that. You don't mess with the New World Order's currency, which is the American dollar. So he suffered the same fate that Saddam did.
It's a pattern.
Yeah. And now we get the third act, which is Syria. Now, do I support Assad? No. But I'll tell you what, life in Syria under Assad, and life in Libya under Gaddafi, and life in Iraq under Saddam Hussein, it was better than it is right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, how can we fight Al Qaeda in Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and then support Al Qaeda in Syria? Somebody please explain that to me, because I'm about to become schizophrenic. Okay? And I don't know if you've seen it, but I had to see it. I'm not going to upload it because this thing is just too disgusting to see, literally, Christians being beheaded slowly with dull, small knives. Okay, I had to watch that. To literally see Christians being crucified under the Al Qaeda controlled squares